Disappointment. It's a part of life. Whether you get turned down for a job you really wanted, or you simply rock up to your favourite ice cream joint only to find that they've run out of your favourite flavour. Either way, it kind of sucks. And, arguably, no one group knows more of a disappointment than gamers. After all, with video game marketing being what it is, it's very easy to get swept up in the hype, only to find that on launch day, the title you've had your eye on for months and months is a big old sack of plops. 2024 has been a brilliant year when it comes to video games, but like any year, it's still had more than its fair share of anti-climaxes. For this list, we're looking at the games of 2024 that failed to live up to our lofty expectations. Now, just because a game is on this list, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was bad, just that it wasn't as good as we'd hoped it would be. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most disappointing games of 2024. Number 10, Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. Thanks to bloody EA and their various loot box scandals, the good name of Star Wars Battlefront has been somewhat tarnished in recent years. So, when it was announced in February 2024 that the 2 original Battlefront games were coming to current-gen consoles, we were more than just a wee bit excited. The Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, developer Aspyr promised, would offer fans of Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2, both of which were 2 decades old by that point, the opportunity to enjoy them once again, both online and offline on PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, PC and Switch. Unfortunately, what players got was a fairly low-effort port that sparked comparisons to the much-maligned Silent Hill HD collection. Yikes. Upon its release, the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection was a complete mess, littered with myriad bugs and other technical issues, numerous multiplayer problems, and a distinct lack of any kind of modernization, leaving many outlets to prompt players simply to go back to the originals rather than trying to muddle through this utter mess of a port. Trust us, this is absolutely not the droid you're looking for. Number 9, Tomb Raider 1-3 Remastered. Well, Aspyr certainly did plops the bed this year, didn't they? Giving players not 1, but 2 disappointing rehashings of games of yesteryear. In fairness to Aspyr, they did at least put in a bit of effort with Tomb Raider 1-3 Remastered, updating the visuals and controls, whilst still retaining the original sounds and FMV cutscenes, though the latter were upscaled with the clever use of AI. Unfortunately, it would seem that there was more work to be done, as many came away from playing Tomb Raider 1-3 Remastered feeling a little let down. What Aspyr did do to shiny up the games was received well. Critics generally liked the updates to the graphics, though the modernised controls were met with a more mixed response. The main issue, however, was that the gameplay mechanics, none of which had received any updates, felt very outdated, especially when compared to the more recent Tomb Raider titles released in the last decade or so. Sadly, it would seem that Tomb Raider 1-3 are probably in need of the full remake treatment, and no amount of graphical upgrades or changes to control schemes could cover up some fundamental flaws. Number 8, Alone in the Dark 2024. The Alone in the Dark franchise has had its ups and downs over the years, and by the time Alone in the Dark 2024, a reimagining of the original Alone in the Dark was announced, well, let's just say that none of us had forgotten Alone in the Dark Illumination. Believe me, we wish that we could. Despite it all, though, we were still rather excited for the reimagining of the grandfather of survival horror. It was set to star David Harbour of Stranger Things fame and Jodie Comer from Killing Eve, and everything shown off before its launch made it look promising, like it had the potential to be the next Resident Evil 2 remake. Alas, it was not meant to be. Now, don't get us wrong, Alone in the Dark 2024 wasn't horrific, and it was a damn sight better than the last 2 Alone in the Dark offerings, but it was still a big old disappointment. A lack of cohesion, dull writing, and ropey combat were all complaints levelled at Alone in the Dark by critics, and whilst the visuals and puzzles were fairly competent, they weren't enough to save the game from being absolutely bang average. Leave this one well enough alone. Number 7, Rise of the Ronin. Alas, This is not a game about how a certain member of 90s boy band Boyzone came to be in the spotlight, more's the pity, but is instead a title from Team Ninja about a samurai. In Rise of Ronin, players step into the shoes of a custom character who embarks on a journey across a war-torn 19th century Japan, shaping their own destiny and that of the entire country as they do so. There are historic cities to be explored, key choices to be made, and a plethora of NPCs to either ally yourself with or kill on a whim. Considering Team Ninja's back catalogue, which includes the likes of Dead or Alive, Ninja Gaiden, and Nioh, everyone assumed that Rise of the Ronin was going to be the best thing since sliced bread. Whilst it wasn't awful though, in fact it garnered praise from a number of outlets for its combat and story. It was quite clear that open world games were not Team Ninja's forte, as the setting felt generic, the exploration unsatisfying, and the side quests somewhat dull and repetitive. There'd have been no boring side quests in a game about Ronan Keating, that's all I'm saying. Number 6, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. You'd think we'd have learned our lesson about getting hyped for live service games by now, but by golly, would you be wrong. Because despite all we know about the genre, we couldn't help but feel a little optimistic about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, on account of the fact that it was developed by Rocksteady Studios, who are behind the fabulous Batman Arkham series. In this third-person open-world action-adventure, lots of hyphens there, players assume the role of members of the titular Suicide Squad as they embark on the also titular mission to kill the Justice League, whose members have fallen under the influence of supervillain Brainiac. This sounds like one heck of a story, and in fact, reviewers called out the plot as the highlight of the game. Sadly, everything else about it, aside from Kevin Conroy's performance as Batman, his final video game role before his death in 2022, let it down somewhat. The live service elements face the majority of the backlash, with many feeling that they soured the whole experience, while the gameplay also caught flack for being repetitive. Suicide Squad? More like Poo-icide Squad. Got 'em. Number 5, Dragon's Dogma 2. We've said it before and we'll say it again. A game doesn't have to be bad to be a bit of a disappointment, and here, to prove us right, is Dragon's Dogma 2. In Dragon's Dogma 2, players start by designing their very own character, before heading out into a parallel version of the world found in the first game in order to hunt a dragon. On the whole, it did quite well with critics, and came in for praise for its refined gameplay, dynamic world, and non-linear narrative. There were a couple of things that spoiled the experience for players though. Firstly, the PC version of Dragon's Dogma 2 was rather poorly optimised, leaving PC players feeling like they'd gotten a subpar experience compared to console-owning fans. Second, the whole thing was riddled with microtransactions, which would be bad enough in and of itself, but they were really weird microtransactions for things that could be obtained fairly easily in-game. We're not sure what's worse, to be honest. Pay-to-win mechanics that allow players to skip hours of grind, or trying to hoodwink unsuspected players into parting with cash for things they could easily get for free. We'll let you decide. Number 4, South Park Snow Day. Whilst South Park the TV show has been consistently good for the 25 odd years it's been on screen, the South Park video game franchise has always been a bit hit or miss. 2014's The Stick of Truth and its follow-up, 2017's The Fractured But Whole, were decent, albeit controversial RPGs. But alas, something went rather wrong when it came to Snow Day, the most recent offering in the South Park video game series. As the title would suggest, Snow Day sees the new kid and the gang enjoying a day off from school during a blizzard, rekindling their fantasy role-playing game in the process. For reasons best known only to the folks behind the game, Snow Day isn't an RPG like its predecessors, but is instead an action-adventure title, and the whole thing is seemingly worse for it. Naturally, critics compared Snow Day to The Stick of Truth and The Fractured Butthole, and the outcome was, well, it was not good. The 3D graphics were lambasted for somehow looking worse than the papercraft visuals of the prior two games. The combat was thought dull and the game was lacking South Park's trademark humour. All in all, definitely not worth taking a day off to play this one. Number 3, Starfield Shattered Space. If you cast your mind all the way back to this time last year, you'll remember that Starfield was included on our 10 most disappointing games of 2023 list. And unfortunately, things haven't gotten better for the spacefaring RPG. We probably should have learned our lesson from the base game's launch, but dang it if we didn't get just a little bit excited about what the expansion, Shattered Space, might bring to the table. But once again, we were massively let down. Shattered Space features a new campaign that sees the protagonist embarking on a journey to Virunkai, and lifting the veil of secrecy from worshippers of a deity known as the Great Serpent. Starfield itself might have gotten a reasonable response from the professionals, but the same can't be said for the DLC. The story was considered uninteresting, the missions dull, and this being a Bethesda game, it was bogged down with myriad technical problems, all of which equated to an expansion that simply wasn't worth the price of admission. Those who loved Starfield from the get-go would have likely enjoyed Shattered Space, but it certainly wasn't enough to bring around anyone who was disappointed by the base game. Number 2, Skull and Bones. Here at Team TripleJump, we really love pirates. Sailing the open sea, drinking rum, wearing eye patches, and forcing those we don't like to walk the plank sounds like a dream. So naturally, when Skull and Bones was announced at E3 2017, we were all very much here for it. A game that draws inspiration from the naval battles of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which is, in our opinion at least, one of the best Assassin's Creed games there is, sounds good to me. Originally slated to release in 2018, Skull and Bones wound up getting delayed. And delayed, and delayed, and delayed, and delayed, until finally landing on PC and consoles in February 2024. It was not worth the wait. Upon its release, Skull and Bones got a very tepid response from critics, many of whom felt that there was a solid game in there somewhere, but that it needed anything to hook players. Both the seafaring and land-based experiences were severely lacking. The story was bland and uninspired, and worst of all, it was just so gosh darned repetitive. The verdict? Strap a cannonball to its boots and send it to languish in Davy Jones's locker for all of eternity. And number 1, Concord. It feels a bit weird to talk about a video game released mere months ago in the past tense, but that's exactly what we have to do here, on account of the fact that the whole thing was shut down just 2 weeks after it launched. Prior to its release, Concord looked quite promising, a first-person hero shooter in the vein of Overwatch, set in a retro-futuristic sci-fi world inhabited by both humans and aliens. What fun! It seems we weren't the only ones with high hopes for Concord either, as the $400 million project was meant to be a sort of flagship franchise for Sony, who envisioned it becoming a sort of Star Wars-level franchise with multiple sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and Christ knows what else. Unfortunately, Concord didn't do enough to stand out from the crowd, and as such, failed to pull players away from the established titles in the genre. At its peak, Concord had fewer than 700 concurrent players on Steam, and wound up selling just 25,000 copies. According to one anonymous dev, a culture of toxic positivity meant that critical issues were overlooked, and the studio was convinced the game couldn't possibly fail.
Sony have shut down Concord developer Firewalk Studios.
I mean, there's being wrong, and then there's this.